so many of you here. You know this was a tough blow after losing Mom, but we've got so many good memories of Dad. Has everybody seen all the photos? Pretty fantastic, right? Yeah, they're awesome. I have a poem I want to read, and my dad wasn't big on poetry by any means, but I think his inspiration helped to write this. So this is for my brothers. You can't see me because I'm hiding. But when you're sitting in your tree stand, you will not be alone. I'm sitting right above you in a stand of my own. When you see the scrapes and rubs from that monster buck, remember what I taught you. Get after him and good luck. You boys are true mountain men, just like me. You can't see me, but I'm watching you from behind that tree. You can't see me because I'm hiding. But when you're standing on the bough looking for birds that dive, I'll be on the stern, another set of sharp eyes. When you cast your plug and hope for a strike, I'm rooting for you with all of my might. When you set the hook and the line gets taut, I'll be so proud of you and the fight that you fought. You can't see me because I'm hiding, but when the Buckies make their springtime run, snag an extra one for me. Let's go have some fun. Now toss him in gentle and give him some play. I'll pray for a slammer to end out that day. For many years, we've fished side by side. Now take your kids out for me on this amazing ride. You can't see me because I'm hiding, but when you're chest deep in the ocean searching for clams, I'm watching with pride because you're a part of who I am. Teach others to dig for steamers on the shore and count the days till you bring them back for more. Share my love for the water because I'll be there enjoying it with you, watching my grandkids growing up just like you. You can't see me because I'm hiding, but when you scout for sign in the new fallen snow, I'll be right behind you, but my tracks, they won't show. Remember what I taught you when you were a kid, the adventures we went on and all that we did. If you listen for my voice, you will hear me yell, you're my son, Hlavac, and I'm proud as hell. No more sappy stuff. I'm going to share some stories about when we were kids. As you can see from the photos, we had a lot of adventures. Dad was a character. You never knew whether he was joking or dead serious when he said anything. He would say it all with a straight face, but you just had no idea. One of my favorite stories is when we were all kids. There was 5 of us, and we were all about a year apart. So we started from this high to this high, 5 of us packed in the back seat of the car. We'd go out every day fishing or hunting or clamming or crabbing or what have you. And so many times a week we'd be driving down a back dirt road and Dad would quickly pull the car over to the side, throw it in the park, and he'd go running off into the woods. And us kids would watch, all of us would just watch out the window for Dad to come back. And it took a couple minutes, and eventually Dad would come back. Sometimes he was brushing leaves and pine needles, like he'd been rolling around in the ground. Sometimes he was walking with a limp, you know. Other times he had a big stick in his hand and he was looking over his shoulder. He'd get in the car and we'd say, tell us, Dad, tell us. And he'd say, well, nah. We'd say, Dad, tell us. And he would tell us about how he almost caught that baby bear this time. He said, and when Dad ran into the woods, he wasn't just jogging. He was scaling over the stone walls and dodging pine trees. He was barreling into the woods. We knew he was after something, and every time it was a baby bear. And it was all for us kids' entertainment. He would tell us, I dove for it this time, and I grabbed it by the back legs, and I dragged it back, and I picked it up, and when I turned around to bring it home, Mama Bear was standing there. And then the story would go on about him having a tussle with Mama Bear. Sometimes there was no Mama Bear there, and he could hear Papa Bear out back, so we had to climb a tree to get away from him. But I mean, fantastic stories, and they went on for years and years and years, and it was all for entertainment for us kids. He took the time to do that for us kids. It wasn't until years later we found out Dad just had to go pee. I remember one winter it was getting so cold out and we had to be ready for that baby bear. We were building a fort in the backyard because he told us Mom wasn't going to let us keep it in the house. So we were building a fort. We spent so much time on this baby bear fort. When it got cold out, we brought all our extra blankets from the house out to the fort. A couple weeks later, Mom found them after they'd been out in the rain and the snow. She was not very happy about that. But she never spoiled Dad's fun, you know. It was great entertainment and it was great family time, and we loved having that memory. I'm sure every one of the kids remembers how many times we rooted for Dad to get us that baby bear. Another thing that was cool, there was a big sandbank, Voluntown, in the middle of Voluntown. Had a big giant sand pit for all the residents to take sand during the winter. Well, it was there all year round, and it was huge. Whenever we would go to town with Dad without Mom, we would cheer for Dad. Please, take us to the sandbank, take us to the sandbank. He'd say, nah, nah. He always liked to build up the anticipation, you know. We'd get to the road, and he, sure enough, would take that left, and we'd cheer. And we'd climb up the sandbank and jump off the top, time and time again, and every once in a while we got Dad to do it too. And he would jump off the top. We'd be filled, as my mom would say, every crack and crevice of all 5 kids and Dad was full of sand. And Dad's famous last words were, okay, just don't tell your mother. So we heard that a lot from Dad. Mom always knew, because when we took off our clothes, there was sand piles all over the place. But again, she never spoiled our fun because she knew we were having a blast with Dad. She had a big mess to pick up, but she did it, and we had a good time with Dad doing that with us. My first hunt with Dad, I think I was probably 8, and Dad said, let's go hunting. I put on my boots, and I walked behind him. I remember we left our property and walked down a dirt road. We crossed a field, crossed a stream, crossed another field, went through some woods, and got to the 3rd field, crossed. I was exhausted, and I was just trying to keep up with Dad. And the whole way, when we finally got to the woods going in, he would point out things. There's the coon tree, and there's that thing, and there's, you know, things for me to remember. Everything looked the same, and when you're 8, you know, I was worried about trying to keep up with Dad and trying not to step on branches. Dad, it was like he was Jesus walking on water in the forest. There was not a sound that came from his feet. Everything was me, breaking sticks and everything. Well, as we were walking forever, it seemed, and out of nowhere, I heard, pow! I jumped out of my skin. I never saw a deer, never heard a deer, and I was looking around. Dad said, well, there he is. Let's go get him. And we walked over to him. I couldn't believe it. Dad had got a deer, and I never even got to see it. And then he says, oh, I forgot the rope at home. Kelly, can you go get it? And for a second, I thought, he's just joking, but he looked dead serious. And I was like, oh, crap. I'm going to die out here. I have no idea where I'm at. I turned around, I said, that way? He's like, no, that way. And so I started heading out. He said, get back here. I brought the rope here. So I'll never forget that first hunting trip with Dad. It was fantastic. When my brother Joe was about this big, he must have been 7 or 8 years old, Dad grabbed him one day from the house. We were out the house. He said, Joe, there's a goose in the field. You got to shoot him. And Joe was very shy and quiet then, and I think this is Dad's way of building confidence in him. And our driveway ended up at the top of a hill. You could see way down a giant cornfield. Well, about 300 yards out in the cornfield, Joe saw a little black speck. And Dad said, shoot him. And so Joe did. All the guys cheered. Dad had some friends with him. They all cheered, and they went down and they got the goose. You know, and Joe figured out years later, there's no way in heck I couldn't even see that goose. Dad shot it, and he put it down there to build my confidence.
That was just a couple weeks ago.
But isn't that fantastic, you know? He took the time to do that for your son. You only need to take a minute, you know, to do something for your kids. Jenny found a stray cat. She was a little kid. She found a stray cat, and she wanted to keep it. And Dad said, well, you can keep it as long as I can name it. And she said, oh, good. What can we name him? What's his name? He says, Temporary. We had Temporary for a lot of years. Another story about Jenny. Somebody said, oh. Jenny was the youngest. And so there was a little drama with the youngest, you know, and she was always getting hurt at school. And Mom and Dad would get called to come pick her up or take her to the doctor's office or something. And I remember one time in particular, Jenny got hurt in gym class, and she was carrying on and Dad came and got her. Do you remember? Dad came, Dad, the x-ray. Dad came and got her, and he brought her to the hospital because the nurse said she needed x-rays. Can't move her hand, it must be broken. Well, Dad looked at it, and he could tell there's nothing wrong with it. So he's sitting there in the emergency room with Jenny, and he says, you know, they changed their x-rays. They do it a different way now. He said, you're going to see a bright light, a crosshair, appear on your hand. Hold it really still, and there's going to be a needle about this long that comes down really fast, right through your hand and back up. But hold your hand still, because it'll hurt a little less. And so she didn't know if he was joking or not, and she got into the x-ray room and put her hand down. When she saw the crosshair appear on her hand, praise Jesus, she was healed! Yeah, Dad had a great way of teaching us kids lessons, you know. I remember Chris coming in the door, slamming the door, all of us kids. It was a spring-loaded door, and when we were all little, 5 of us coming in and out of the doors, you know, Dad was a vet. He hears banging, and he's jumping and diving for cover. And he just kept telling us, don't slam the door, don't slam the door. Finally, one day, I remember Chris, he was really little. He was the unlucky one that happened to slam the door when Dad had enough. And so Dad brought his chair, and he sat down in front of the door with Chris. He said, go out the door and shut the door. And he did. He said, come back in, shut the door. For half an hour, Dad sat there, having Chris open the door and go out, open the door and come in. None of us kids would ever do that again, you know. It was a good way. He had the patience, and he took the time to teach us lessons in his own way. I remember Jenny, every time she got in trouble, go stomping up the stairs. Stop your stomping. Stop your stomping. And finally one day, he held her by the hand at the kitchen table. He said, you stomp. And when she got done, stomp some more. When she got done, you stomp some more. She stomped so much, that took it right out of her. She never stomped again going upstairs. Chris was always a wiry little one, and he wanted to go trapping. He was little. He didn't even have a 22 yet, so it must have been 7 or 8. Well, Dad set up a trap line with him, and it was Chris's first trap line. And Chris was going to go out at 7 or 8 years old and check the trap line, but all he had was a BB gun back then. So Chris went out to check it. Half an hour goes by, and Chris isn't back, and Mom starts fretting. Dad, go get Chris. Nope, he can handle this. He knows what he's doing. Another half an hour goes by, and Mom's really freaking out. You got to bring Chris home. Something must have happened. Nope, he knows what he's doing. Well, a little while later, we hear this racket outside. Dad starts cheering. He knew what it was. Chris had caught a big coon in his trap. And the BB gun can't kill a coon. It's got a chain about this long. Chris dug up the spike that's in the ground and drug the thing all the way home. He must have weighed 60 pounds at the time, and the coon was probably heavier than he was. But, you know, Dad was so proud. And again, he let Chris do that all on his own, you know. He knew what he was doing raising his boys, giving them confidence and letting them take the bull by the horns and do what they knew that they wanted to do. My brother Brian, when he was, I don't know, I think in my memory, he was probably 12, 13. My dad was going to take him snipe hunting. It was his path into becoming a man in the Hlavac family. Well, we'd always heard stories about snipe, but they were always when the guys were talking, and we really weren't involved in it. It was something sacred in our family. So we only heard little stories now and again about it, but we all knew we wanted to do it. We wanted to hear about it. We wanted to know what was going on with snipe hunting. We're all jealous. Brian was the first one that got to go. Well, Dad had been preparing bait for Brian for weeks, and it was in a burlap bag, and it was fermented fish guts and deer entrails, and the nastiest mess you could imagine was in there for weeks. Well, the family, Uncle Mark, where are you? You weren't accomplished, weren't you? They took Brian out, Uncle Mark's property, back in the swamps, way back in the woods, and it's dusk. And they told Brian, you stand there like this, with the burlap bag open, with his face right above it. You stand there in the woods, and we're going to do a drive, and we're going to drive that snipe right into you. You catch him, you bring it back to the house. That's your passage right there. And so Brian stood out there, and he stood out there, and he stood out there, and it got dark. You know, time goes by, and he's like, the guy should have been back by now. And he's like, you know, I've never seen a snipe in a book. I don't know what a snipe is. And after, I don't know, hours, it seemed like hours, Brian finally made his way through the dark back to the house, and there were the guys all drinking beer and having a good time. They cheered for him and welcomed him into being a man in the Hlavac family. He passed the test. He was standing out there all by himself snipe hunting. But again, Dad took the time to do this for his sons, you know? When us kids would get off the school bus, we had a long dirt driveway, and it was crowded with trees. A few times a week, sometimes it wouldn't happen for weeks, Dad would stand behind a tree somewhere, and he would jump out and scare the bejesus out of us kids. But it wasn't enough so it was all the time, and we'd forget about it, and we'd be walking down the driveway, singing our songs or whatever. Dad would jump out and the same thing again. He'd laugh so hard at us kids. He thought it was the greatest thing. But it was awesome that he took the time to do that, you know? Jump out of the bushes and scare us half to death. One year, Dad got a pair of boxing gloves for Joe and Chris for Christmas. They were little, and they opened them up right in the middle of opening presents. They opened them up, boxing gloves. We all grew up on Muhammad Ali, so they were like, let's box now. Mom said, no, we're going to finish opening presents. I remember Dad saying, no, let the boys box. So they put on the boxing gloves, and you know, they're huge and they're padded. You don't think anybody's going to get hurt. And they started sparring, and Joe caught Chris with a right hook right in his nose, and blood spattered all over Christmas presents, all over the couch. Chris was crying, Mom was screaming. You know, Dad was in the doghouse again, but he was used to it. What's that, Joe? Dad taught me to drive, and I was 12. I remember it was raining and it was dark out, and he pulled over next to Mike's Bait and Tackle in Voluntown, and he got out and he said, you're driving. And he came around, I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. So I got in the driver's seat, he told me adjust my mirrors and figure out where, I said, well, which pedal does which? I had no idea, I was a little kid. But somehow we made it home, and at the end of the driveway, he got out and he had me come around, and he said, every time we go to town, it's just you and me, you're gonna do the driving. But what were his famous last words he told me? Don't tell your mother. And so for years, you know, starting when I was 12, I could always drive. It was, you know, it was something that we always did. Dad didn't do things like other people did, but, you know, we never got in trouble except for with Mom, you know, from anybody else. One more. I could stand up here for days and tell stories, but just one more. Whenever we got our report cards, they usually come out on a Friday. And that really stunk because the boys always wanted to go. Joe and I got ours on the same day. And he always wanted to go hunting every single day after school. And Dad gave him permission. You don't have to do homework. Ever. Tell your teacher I said so. You don't have to do homework. Well, that didn't fly well at school. But Joe would do his homework, so his grades were okay because he was smart, but every single comment was from every teacher saying Joe puts in no effort, Joe won't do his homework. Dad was okay with that. It was all right. He was out hunting. He was doing important stuff. I remember one day, instead of giving it to Mom and Dad to sign and bring back to school, Joe said, let's give it to Dad this morning. So we did. We gave our report cards to Dad, and he looked at them. And he said, Joe, I'm going to get in trouble for this one. And so he opened the top of the stove and he threw them in. He said, don't tell your mother. Well, that was great and all, but that's in the years when we had permanent report cards. They last the whole year. Joe and I had to go to school and explain to the teachers how Dad threw our report cards in the wood stove. And that was a rough position that we got put into, you know. But again, Dad thought that there were priorities in life. He said, the school has you for 6 hours a day. When you come home, you ought to be able to do what you want to do. And, you know, and he would tell us all the time, you tell the teacher I said so. You put a few choice words in there. Of course, we could never tell our teachers any of what he was saying, but, you know, but he had our back then, you know. My dad died way too young. 68 is way too young to die. And I need to have something good come out of this so I can feel better. And even if it's just standing here in front of you people, telling you stories about what a good father my dad was, especially when we were kids and we needed it, you love on your families. We can't do anything about the people that have passed. We can't go back and change it. But your wife, your husband, your kids, your parents, you've got them now, you love on them. You love on them. You take the time for them. Just in these handful of stories that I shared, you see how little, simple, silly things can just be in your heart, and they can make you become the adult that you become. You take the time with your kids. Get unplugged. You know, we grew up in the middle of Voluntown. We had 3 channels. That's how plugged in we were. Get unplugged and spend time with your families. Love on them. Just do what you got to do. And, you know, if one of you makes a better relationship out of this, then it was worth it, you know. Dad was an avid fisherman and a hunter, like you see, but one of his most recent joys was take a vet fishing. And this van would come and they'd pick up Dad. I got to go on a few adventures with him too. They'd pick him up at the vet center and they would take him all day. One day when I dropped him off, it was funny. It was like he was going on a field trip, and I just waved to him leaving for the whole day. And they took him out, and they gave him this huge breakfast. Dad and dozens and dozens and dozens of other vets. Huge breakfast. They treated him like the hero that he is. They set him up with fish poles and bait, and they went fishing for the whole day. They had a blast. Dad wasn't able to take himself out fishing for the last little while here, but he got to go take a vet fishing, which was awesome. There's some photos over here, and one of them is my favorite. There's one here of a strongman competition we did just a few weeks ago, and we raised money for Take a Vet Fishing, and Dad was so proud. He got to sit at the table, and the donation box was there, and the following week, which was just a couple weeks ago, we went to a Take a Vet Fishing event where they had a giant luncheon for all of us. And my Uncle Jimmy and myself and Dad got to go, and they honored Dad there. He had a check that he was giving them, and he was really honored, and it was wonderful. And Dad loved that organization. Well, Dad got up. They had a live band playing rock and roll, and Dad loved rock and roll. And he stood up, and I thought he was stretching his back. And he wasn't very steady on his feet this past few months. And he walked up there, and I walked up with him, and we danced. Dad and I got to dance. So it was like 2 weeks ago. At 40-something, I got to have a dance with my dad. And that is such an awesome memory and awesome blessing that I have that I will live with for the rest of my life, you know. I saw my dad the day before I found him unconscious. I was working on his pellet stove. It was giving him trouble. And when I left, it was the same thing I always said and always did. When I got ready to leave, I gave him a hug, and he hugs me, and I said, I love you, Dad. He said, I love you too, girl. And he says, drive careful. I said, I always do. And I started walking down the hallway. And the last words I ever heard my father speak are so precious to me because I get to hold on to them forever. I heard him say to Uncle Jimmy, wow, isn't she just a wonderful person? And just hearing those words were the last words I ever heard my dad speak. So be that wonderful person to your husband, and be that wonderful person to your wife, be that wonderful person to your kids, because it is an awesome thing to know that my dad said those as the last words I got to hear him say. Again, I could go on forever, but I'm gonna, my brother Brian is gonna come up here to speak for a minute, but first I'm gonna invite Ray up here. Ray is from Take a Vet Fishing, and he's one of the guys that helps this organization, so we can tell you just a little bit about it. No, I'll stand right with you.
Really special to be here, and I want to say right off, I'm here on the behalf of a whole lot of other people that volunteer to get our vets out of the clinical environment out for a day of fishing. It's that simple. And obviously, Kelly, you explained it so well what happens there and how it goes. It's kind of bittersweet because I lost my own dad about a month ago, and I loved what he said about you. Wow.
Yeah.
You know, that's awesome. And I love those stories. He's really a character.
Yeah, he's a character.
So I met your dad a few times that he was out there, and that last time that he was there without you, he was talking about you. And he was carrying on, and from all those pictures I saw there, you know, he keeps a pretty straight face, but he definitely had a twinkle in his eye when he was talking about what your plans were to fundraise and everything like that. And I just thank you for letting us be a part of his life and of your life. And thank you to all the veterans here for your service. I did not get to serve myself, and many of our volunteers hadn't either. And we discovered that there are a lot of folks out there that want to help out with vets and reach out to those that need tending to, and that would love to get out and do stuff. And it's not always easy. You know, folks don't typically walk in off the street into the VFW post and say, how can we help? But through Take a Vet Fishing, we found that magic formula, and it's really simple. It's just called hospitality. And, you know, we've made some good connections, and we found a way to do transportation, and we rounded up a whole bunch of fishing poles, and, you know, and in the springtime, we found a bunch of fishing game clubs up in this part of Connecticut, too, that like to share their facilities and stock their pond, throw 500 to 1,000 fish into a pond, and then we have a good time. And I'm going to stay in touch with Kelly, so we'll let you know when we're doing stuff, and if there's some folks that like to pitch in and help out, it'd be a pleasure to have.
We did set up a Dick Hlavac Take a Vet Fishing Memorial. A lot of you have asked me where the box is, and it's right up here.
Anyway, thank you so much, and your brothers too.
That's right. Everyone, I'm Brian. I'm the oldest of the bunch, and I really want to talk about how amazing my dad's survival and skills for providing for his family were. I came from the city. I met my dad when I was 8. I automatically, from being a lonely child, had an instant family. And now I had a father, and now I had 2 brothers and sisters. And it was an amazing thing for me. Coming from the projects, really, up to Voluntown over here, which was like God's country to me, the difference was really overwhelming. It was where I could not wait for summer vacation. I couldn't wait for the holiday week to come spend time with Dad. What I found so amazing, and I'm sure however you guys know my dad, his ability to provide from the land and the ocean surpasses anything I've ever even been involved with before or today. I don't know anyone who could get out there and get it done with everything available, he found it and he got it for us and nurtured us with it. I recall being the best hunter he was. I mean, I remember only a handful of times of him coming back from a hunting trip without something to eat. Normally it was 2 or 3, and us boys, we'd have to get out there and drag him home. It was him coming through the door. I didn't get anything, but you know what? Get buckets, you guys. I found a huge raspberry patch. We're going to go get them. I mean, it was, now we have cereal with raspberries on them, not just cereal with goat milk, by the way. I will tell you, when I was 8 and I rolled up there for the first time, it was a goat. It was patty goat. And we milked this goat twice a day, and that was our milk, that was our butter. Mom used to make butter out of it, and cream, and everything else. Same thing with, I mean, when I'd be there for the whole summer, and every single day, as Kelly would say, he would do something to be influential for us. Not a day went by that nothing happened. Something of significance happened every single day. He would say, let's go, we're going to go to the ocean, we're going to go pull mussels today. Huh? Yeah, low tide is another hour, let's go. And we'd go out there, and sure enough, low tide, and we would all gather mussels off the side of the banks, and we'd go home and we'd spend the day cleaning them, and we'd spend the night eating them. And then the next day, it would be, you know what, we're going to go firelighting tonight. What's firelighting? Oh, you're going to love this. We're going to go out at night, we're going to catch crabs when it's low tide. And we'd be out there all night long. Whenever low tide was, we'd be out there until 3 in the morning. And of course, when we got home, Mom, the girls would wake up because all the soft shells would eat right then and there. It doesn't matter if it was 1 o'clock or if it was 5 in the morning. We ate soft shell crab.
Mom always told me I wasn't old enough.
That's right, Jay. Yeah. You know, it goes all around with that. I remember before Hurricane Gloria, Dad had quite a few lobster pots. I remember freezing. My hands would be so cold. We'd hold in my hand and we would harvest lobster, eat like people do in rich lands. I mean, we had a table full of lobster after we harvested them every 3 or 4 days that would feed us all until we were sick of lobster. But then we'd all sit there as a family, as a unit, and we'd pick every piece out and we'd freeze it. We'd make lobster rolls, we'd make lobster patties. Then the next day it'd be like, hey, you know what? The blueberries are ripe and huckleberries. Let's get buckets. We got about a 3-week window here to pick blueberries. And we would harvest every berry that was ripe every other day for 3 weeks. We'd have stacks of blueberries for the winter in the freezer. I mean, these are things that he would find while he was out hunting, patches, just, again, the ability to provide, you know, all the different, every single resource that I can view as imaginable out here, he found a way to get it and get it to us and teach us how to do it. I haven't even begun to talk about fishing. Fishing, I mean, he knew where the fish were. It didn't matter. I don't remember being skunked. I mean, I might not have been a good fisherman, but he put us on fish every single time. Every time we went. I don't recall even going trout fishing, not catching something. The waters, I mean, he knew where to go, he knew what to catch, he knew when to go. I remember going longline. I mean, this is something you do as a kid. I mean, he'd laugh at us while we're getting bit by the bloodworms. You know, we're trying to bait these things, we throw them out there and have a good old time. He'd tell stories, tell jokes. Next thing you know, we're pulling up flounder, just buckets of them, you know. I mean, this is to provide for his family. And we could take a break for a day, play kickball the next day. You know, go down to the old pond. And there was just always a way to harvest the resources in this beautiful state. And I just couldn't wait to come back. We used to make excuses why I missed the bus to go home. It was like, no, I didn't want to go back home. I wanted to stay here. I couldn't wait for summer. I couldn't wait for it because, you know, even Dad took a job as a farm hand, as room and board for a big, beautiful farmhouse. He had to work his tail off feeding these, could be anywhere from 75 to 200 head of cattle, depending. He took calves and made them into heifers, basically. But what that provided was an amazing farmhouse that was built back in the day, an amazing piece of property with a duck pond in the back. It was all for us. I mean, he didn't have to work like that to live in this beautiful house and this beautiful piece of property, but he did it to raise his family properly. And you know, some people have different ways of doing things. My dad had his own way, and there will not be another way like his, and there's no doubt about it. What I take from it, I've learned quite a bit. I can grow a garden right now if I needed to. I can go kill a deer if I have to. I can clean fish. I can go catch clams. I can do it all. I could go out and provide. If everything went dark, we had to get off the grid, I know I can survive. And I owe every single bit of that to my father. And I know my brothers and sisters to this day, they lived the way my dad did. I see my brothers, and I haven't, you know, probably give them as much respect as I should, but those guys, they live off the wood stove, they go out hunting, they do their thing the same way. And I give them a lot of respect for that, because it's not easy. And all you folks probably live the same way over here. It's a different life this side of Connecticut. Even, I was born in Danbury. Even over there, it's completely different. They don't hunt fish. Not a lot of bartering going on. Like I know it's a good system over here. Dad would come home. We'd be sitting there shining light, clean deer, and he'd say, "Come on, we're going to take this half a deer over to a friend's. We got to go bring this to him." I'd say, "Well, why are we doing that?" You know, he said, "You'll see. Because next summer, when this man's melons are ripe, he's going to let me have a lot of melons." That type of situation. So we'd give this man a half a deer, and this man was a melon farmer, and with the farmers, he'd go knocking on the door, "Hey, yeah, oh yeah, Dick, go ahead. Get a laundry basket full. Come back next week. There's going to be more." So it was that type of thing, and here we are eating fresh melon. Why? Because he gave him a half a deer last winter. You know, that's the type of stuff that is very impressive, especially when you're coming from an inner city and you get to see it firsthand. Those who are around it every day maybe don't, you know, you're just used to it. That's your life. So you take it from someone who doesn't get that all the time, and you get to experience it. It's quite impressive. And you know, I smoke a lot of meat now, and I do a lot of cooking on a smoker, and I attribute all this to my father. And you know, I'm very thankful for it. I'm thankful for my family, and I'm thankful for all of you being here, and I really appreciate everyone knowing my father and loving him and caring for him. I thank our military back here for helping our freedom, and I thank everyone, and thank you very much for listening.
Anybody that doesn't know, well, everybody does know, this is Shelby, Joe's wife.
Knock it off. Yes, he calls me Meatloaf. That's my nickname. It's not sweetheart, it's not honey. He calls me Meatloaf, and I have to live with that every day of my life. It sucks, but, you know, I guess it's better than some of the things that I call him. I just wanted to say real quick, I've only been in the family 21 years. I got Aaron beat by 1 year. 1 year. She's been in 20, I've been in 21. So I claim hierarchy. But I just wanted to say real quick, Dad was one of the greatest guys I ever knew. I, like Brian, I was a city girl when I met Joe, and I met Joe in Savannah, Georgia. He's kind of a city boy. I had no clue what I was getting in for. No clue at all. He ran around, did all the fun city stuff with me, and then we finally got together and we come up to visit. And the very first time I meet his family, this 21 years ago, you know, I was sporting my really cool overalls that were Tommy Hilfiger that were like $80, and I just thought I was rocking it, you know, and I come walking up and Dad's like, "Hey, you ready to go hunting?" And I'm like, no, you know, these are my pretty overalls. And he was like, he couldn't get it. He's like, "Why are you wearing those? You know, unless you're going to go out hunting." And I was like, "Dad, I don't hunt. I don't do that kind of stuff. I don't get my hands dirty. Come on." The whole time I was here visiting with Dad, he kept telling me he was going to break me. He was going to make me a country girl one way or another. I didn't believe him. I didn't have it in me. I just couldn't do it. So I go back to Georgia. Well, 3 years later, we move up to Connecticut. Once again, I'm in my fancy duds, my fancy shoes. I'm walking through cow poop in the yard. I'm complaining, crying about it. And Dad's like, "Listen, we lived with him for a year, our first year here." He's like, "Listen, you're going to be a country girl before you know it." I didn't buy it. I didn't believe it. Well, before long, Dad has me traipsing through the woods, trading in my good shoes. I had to buy a pair of boots that weren't like pretty. They were ugly, but they were my boots. And he kept telling me, you know, anybody knows me, I'm a huge animal advocate. I'm not into the whole hunting thing. I mean, God bless the ones that are, but I don't do any of that. You know, I pick up dead animals out of the road and cry while I move them over to the side and stuff like that. So Dad, one day, they had a bunch of chickens, and Dad said, we're going to slaughter chickens today. And I'm like, oh, not me. He's like, no. He's like, you got to be out here. We're doing it as a family. So I wasn't real happy about it. So I get out there, Joe's there. I think Kelly may have been there. There's a bunch of us there. I think Chris was there. So they have all these chickens running around. And Dad would pick up the chicken, whack, and I'm like, what? I'm crying my eyes out, and Dad keeps telling me, suck it up, you're a country girl, you can do it. And he just kept doing it and doing it and doing it and telling me if I was going to be a Hlavac, I had to be a country girl. So I don't know what happened, but the devil got to me. I ran over, I grabbed his chicken, I picked him up, whack! I ripped the feathers out like you've never seen. And you would have thought there were diamonds in this chicken. I finally got down, I put him on the ground, I'm like, there, I'm done. Dad's like, you're a country girl. I cried for weeks. I could not believe I'd done this to a chicken, but I did. But I'm like Kelly, I got a million stories of Dad. Some of them are the dumbest stories, some of them are the funniest. Dad was just, anybody that knew him, which most of you did, he was just a true character. We all loved him, and you talked about the last words he said to you. The first words Dad said to me when he met me in the airport, he picked us up in the airport, and he looked at me and he goes, wow, you really are pretty. And he turned to Joe and he says, if you don't keep her, I'm going to keep her. And we visited for the first week, and when I went home, his parents called him and they said, listen, if you don't marry that girl, you're out of the family, she's in. So I already had an in, so that's kind of how I got into the family. He's been a good father-in-law. Mom was a good father, mother-in-law. We had a great time with them. We did a lot of fun stuff with them over the years. Last thing I'll tell you, the whole fishing thing. I'm not big into fishing. I do it with Joe because he has a boat, and if I want to see him in the summer, I have to go out on the boat. I'm not big on, I get sick. I have a lawn chair. I relax in the lawn chair and yell at him to slow down because I'm trying to get a suntan, and okay, I'm a little high maintenance. So we go out fishing with Dad, and I kept telling Joe, it's not a good idea. I'm going to get sick. Joe's like, you're not going to get sick. So we're going, and like Joe and I go to Beach Pond, I can fish there, that's great because I get fat, I can swim, No, they go out in the ocean, and we're going, and I'm not feeling good, and we're going. Finally, we were out like 2 hours. We get all the way out there, and I look at Joe, and I said, I don't feel good, I'm sick. And he's like, hey, Dad's not taking you back now. So I sit there a minute, and my stomach's rolling, and I turn to Dad, and I said, Dad, I don't feel good, I'm seasick. He goes, you're fine, you haven't thrown up. I looked at him, and I went, whoa! And I looked at him, I said, I don't feel good. And he's like, you're never coming fishing again. I don't think I ever went fishing with Dad again. He never took me out in the ocean again, He wouldn't take me anywhere like that, only on shore because he didn't trust me. But he did drive all the way back 2 hours and took me home because I was sick. But he really was a good guy, and we loved him a lot. We're going to miss him a lot, and we're very happy for everybody that's here to support us and give us love. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's probably it, unless anybody else wants to come up and speak. I don't think anybody else was having anything planned. So why don't we have some music, and we'll eat some more food, and we'll tell some more stories, okay? All right, thank you. Thank you.